Hello? Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Alan. I am the Senior Director at C2 Education at Diamond Bar. So, well, just want to say that, thank you for that fabulous conferences there. I actually know that all of you have spent a lot of time listening from like top educators, right? Understanding about like how the college works and the application. So as for our meeting, we want to focus on something different. It'll be regarding to the digital SAT, okay? So let me actually share my PowerPoint and then we'll be starting our presentation. And in the meantime, if you do have any questions, whether in English or in Chinese, please feel free to leave them under the chat box and then we'll be going over them all together during the Q&A, okay? All right. Okay. So digital SAT. This is something some of our family has already heard of that. Others may not. They may wonder, oh, what it is, right? How is that different compared to the real SAT? Or, oh, whether I need to take it or not, right? Or even why do I have to take this test, right? So during today's presentation, I'll be explaining those in detail, okay? So that you know what has been changes and what do we need to do at this time for your student. But before we do that, I just want to give you a brief introduction about C2 Education. At C2, we're a nationalized program. We've been opening for 25 years, providing tutoring support for students from K to 12. We have actually 25,000 students and tons of tutors available. And we have centers all around different areas, West, East Coast, okay? So what we're doing here is that we've been providing a customized instruction to all of our families, helping on the curriculums, and helping them to work on GPA management, test preparation, college counseling, and of course, helping them to work on the college essays and extracurricular activities. So depends on students' need, we'll be able to come up with a specific plan for them to work on, okay? All right, so let's go to the digital SCT. So these are, during this presentation today, these are the items that we like to cover. First of all, how the test is structured. And of course, comparing to the current SAT, right? How does the new digital SAT is changing versus the part that isn't changing? And third, for which high school classes should prepare for the digital SAT compared to the current test? And of course, how the C2s are addressing the test and supporting our students, okay? So what is digital SAT? Basically, this is a new formatted test that made by College Board. They actually announced it back in 2022, saying that they're gonna adapt the new test-taking environments and come up with something new to suit the student better. So a couple of highlights here will be, first, the test will be completely digital. So before, of course, all the real SATs were done during using papers and pencils, but no, at this moment, students will be taking those tests online. So using their own devices. And of course, they had to take it either at a school or at a test center, but we'll elaborate that later in more detail. And the second part, the test will be very adaptive. So basically meaning that the student will be taking different kind of question depending on their level, depends on the amount of question they corrected at the first part. So we will also explain that in more detail, okay? And lastly, the test will be more secure, because since all the students will be taking different tests, it actually reduces the potential of cheating. So they can make sure the scores there actually reflect each of the students' level, okay? So for the test, again, it's a digital test. The student may not take the paper or pencil test without any accommodation. So unless that you're specifically requesting that, oh, my student will have to take the paper test, right? Then certain accommodation can be made. And of course, like we shared it earlier, the test can be only delivered at testing center and school. So unlike some of the other standard tests, for instance, IAC or SSAT, while students may choose to either take the test at a center or taking it at home, right? They don't give you the option. You had to bring your own device and then taking a test at the designated location. Okay, so yes, it says that you may use your own devices, right? Or the ones that issued by school. So you need to have like some laptop or computer available there. Okay, all right. And for the second part, the SAT will be adaptive. So what does that mean? It means the tests are actually coming up with two sections. So a reading/writing plus a math portion. So for those of you who have already taken the paper or have done some preparation, you may thought that, oh, I mean, that sounds the same, right? You're still taking reading, writing, math, right? But no, the section there will be different. So each of the section will have 2 modules. So there will be module 1, module 2 for reading, writing, and then same module 1, module 2 for math. And then the difficulty of the second module will be determined by the student's performance in module 1. So as you can see in the chart there, right? The module 1 will have a mix of difficulty level. So if the students are able to perform well on the test, they will be assigned to some harder question in module 2. And then they will have a potential to achieve an 800 point, which is the perfect score. Otherwise, they'll be assigned to easy to medium module 2, which easier question, right? But it'll be very unlikely for them to get a perfect score. The cap will be somewhere around like 600, around that number. Okay, so which is why that we want to make sure that students will really perform well, right, during the first portion, so they can aim for the perfect score. Okay, so that's something that's different compared to the old SAT. And of course, since it's digital and adaptive, they were able to make some changes to the test as well. So here is just a brief summary. We'll be going to that in more detail later on the future slides. But what you can see here is that first, because if it's digital, they were able to make the test shorter than before. So for the real SAT, it's actually 3 hours and 15 minutes at this moment. But for the new digital SAT, they were shortening the time. Okay. And second, for the scoring, it will be available, in days instead of weeks. So at this very moment, it typically takes 2 weeks for them to release the score. But for under the digital format, you get the score much sooner. Okay. And lastly, when it comes to the test, I mean, since it's personalized, right, you can make sure that they gave you the test based on the student's performance. So they can make sure that all the students will try their best to answer as many questions as possible, so that the score will be directly reflecting on how they do. Okay. All right. So that's going to those parts in detail. So first of all, it will be the test structure and the time. Okay. So over the next few slides, we'll actually explain how much time you're going to spend for each section and how many questions you're going to have. So for how does the digital SAT structure? Basically, like I shared earlier, there are 2 sections, a math and a reading plus writing section. So each section will have 2 modules I described above. So the reading and writing modules will include those questions in the same module, and the math modules will contain 22 questions to be completed within 35 minutes. And of course, for the math portion there, it will still have multiple choices question plus some student generated responses, which is also called as free response questions. And for the reading and writing portions there, 2 modules, you actually have 27 questions to complete in each module, which is much shorter than what we're having for the current paper SAT. And all the questions, of course, will be multiple choices question you're choosing for. So in general, the test will only take 2 hours and 14 minutes to complete. So it's actually going to be like almost an hour shorter than what we're having at this moment. And as for the digital SAT timeline, so they were first announced back in 2022. And at this moment, we're kind of already at the end of the spring. So they have actually already provided some full-length digital SAT to international students. And some of the students have already taken that back in March. So for this fall, the College Board will start offering digital PSATs. So for most of our high school students, right, whether in this area, right, or on some other area on their counties, typically schools will be offering PSAT for sophomores and juniors during mid-October. So this year is the first year they're going to administer the test in the digital platform. And then starting from spring of 2024, they will no longer have any paper tests. So everything will be digital. And moving to the next slide. What are the changes and what stays the same, right? We actually have many students asking me that question. Oh, Alan, I'm actually a sophomore there. I've been preparing for SAT, right? SAT2. So what should I do? Should I take the test right now, right? Or should I do something different, right? Or what are the things I need to prepare different to ace the digital SAT? So this is what I'm going to share with you. Okay. So what's going to stay the same? Well, first of all, the scoring scale will be still between 400 to 1600. Okay, there won't be any change. And of course, there will be no essay sessions, right? I mean, a long time ago, we had that essay portion, but we no longer have that, and they will still keep that way. Okay, and of course, there will still be the reading, writing section and math section because they want to evaluate the students' skill set on all three areas. And for the questions, of course, still all multiple choices questions for the English, and then multiple choices plus for response question for the math. And the good thing for our students who are preparing for the test right now, the knowledges and the skills are tested are about the same. So, I mean, there's some slight difference there, which I will share later, but the majority of the concepts or the core knowledges will be tested in the digital SAT. And when it comes to what's changing, well, first of all, test is definitely shorter, right? Shorter than before. 45 minutes here is actually an hour, is actually shorter, reduced like by an hour. And the test, of course, being adaptive, digital, right? And which leads to a shorter reading passage. So, I mean, later on, we'll have a detailed chart showing like how much time you're going to spend for each section, as well as the amount of time you spend per question. But it's actually much shorter than before. And another good thing is that there will no longer be a long passage during the reading section. So, I mean, for at this moment, right, when the student is taking the reading test, many students complain to me saying that, oh, Alan, if I don't know how to like read one passage, I'm actually struggling with that like 10, 11 questions that are associated with that, right? So I end up losing a lot of points. But for the new tester, you're actually getting one question per passage. So the passage will be much shorter, and then it will test you on specific areas so that even if you didn't know how to approach one question, it won't affect your score much. Okay. And of course, for writing there, it will no longer be a separate section. So before we have reading session as section 1, and then with a follow-up session for writing only. But now they're merging reading and writing together because they know that this is essential skills that it should be tested not separately, but all together. So that's another change there. And then as for math, both math sections are being now allowing using calculator, unlike before, which we only allowed it during session 4. So that means students will be able to, use calculator for all the questions. But of course, it doesn't mean that they should always use that, because typically for our students there, in order for them to maximize their math score, we actually want to make sure that they know how to solve the question sometimes using their mind, which is actually faster than using a calculator. And as for the contents there, they will be focusing a bit more on geometry and trigonometry. This is actually one of the major changes in terms of the subject that covered in the math. Before, the math will be mainly covering algebra 1, basically all the core math material, and algebra 2, right, those advanced concepts, as well as problem solving and data analysis skill. So there are only a small amount of geometries, right? Some trigonometries involved, no more than like 2-3 questions. But the digital SAT will have more of those questions. So if our student, let's say, have only, let's say that if they only take geometry during the summertime, right, didn't spend too much time on that, then they need to be more careful. Okay. All right. And we have a very nice chart here, just showing the digital versus paper reading and writing sections. So you can see that as for the digital test, the total number of questions will be 54 questions compared to before is actually 52 plus 44, right? So the amount of question actually went half. And the total time here also goes from 100 minutes to nearly an hour. So you actually will have approximately 71 seconds for each of the question compared to before you had to spend like 75 plus minutes for the reading portion, right? And the writing portions there, yes, you tend to spend like much less time on the old SAT, but since now they're merging the reading and writing together, right? It's still beneficial for our students because most of the students we have there, they actually struggle more with the reading. They just don't know how to interpret those passages properly. Okay, and for question types, They will all be the same, but of course, there will be one passage per question. So they will greatly increase the chance for students to score well if they know all those topics well. And as for the passage subjects, they will still cover literature, but it will include more prose and poetry, which is one part that I see our students struggling with, right? But it will be covered, it will be involved more on the digital SAT, plus those like typical history, social studies passage, as well as humanities and sciences. Okay. As for math, well, this is the part that we see a bit more changes there, right? 44 questions versus 58 questions from the paper test, right? So it also allows students to work on each question for more times. So it'll be a total time of like 70 minutes versus 80 minutes, but for the amount of time you spend per question, it actually goes up from 83 to 95 seconds, so that it can help our students to eliminate any sort of carry mistake, so they can come up with their answers most productively. And as for the question type, it will still be similar, a mixture of multiple choices and free responses. And for the word problem subject, it will still conclude those science, social science, and of course, some real life questions. So the biggest part of the change still will be more involving in geometry and trigonometry. Okay. All right. So, yep, and this is another slide just showing how the math section changes, question type, and you're allowed to use calculators, right? You actually have more time per questions, and then, yeah, more figures involved. Okay. So, yeah, and once we're done with the discussing about the changes, now it comes to who should prepare for the test. Okay, because at this moment, I know that many juniors, sophomores, freshmen, right? They may think on, whether I should prepare for the paper test or the digital test, right? So it really depends on where the students are currently at. So for the class of 2024, meaning all the current junior or upcoming seniors, if you're actually going to use if you're actually planning to use SAT to apply any college, then definitely we want to work on the paper test, because you won't have the opportunity to take the digital test, since that will be offered in March and you have already submitted all your application and waiting for a decision at that time, right? So for all of our juniors there, we want them to work on the test right now. If they haven't done so, we highly suggest them to sign up for the August test, the October, even the November, so they can have as many tries as possible. Occasionally, I could even recommend our students to do the May test, but typically that contradicts with the AP schedule. So it depends on whether students is ready for that. And for the classes of 2026 and younger, meaning that for all the upcoming sophomore, like current freshmen or younger, then of course you'll be mainly preparing for the digital test. Because even if you take the paper test right now, the colleges may not want to see that. They actually want to see you having a more recent test, right? Like over the past 2 years by the time you're applying for college. So taking the test in the sophomore year, junior year will be most ideal. And as for those who are in sophomores, well, this is the tricky parts, right? So we actually, if the student have been preparing for the test over the past month or the past year, right? We actually will highly recommend them to take and finalize their score using a paper test by the end of this year, December of 2023. This way, they can finish with the knowing paper SAT. And if that's not possible, of course, we'll have the students to learning the test, right? And then preparing for the digital test for next year. But the reason we want to have the upcoming juniors, current sophomores, to finish the paper test is that this is the best opportunity for them to get the score they need. Because once entering junior year, for those who are aiming for top tier school, they're obviously going to take like 4 to 6 AP courses, and along with lots of activities, programs, volunteer. So they won't have time to prepare for these tests. So that's why that if they're able to finish the test by this year, it will save tons of time. So they can put the SAT aside and no longer worry about this. But of course, if you're planning to prepare at a later time, right, just to give yourself a higher chance that with the new test, then this is also doable, because you have a full year working on those tests, right, for the 2024. And another few things that we want our current sophomores to know is that starting from this October, right, they're actually been offering the first digital PSAT. So for those who would like to prepare for the test, right, they prepare on the PSAT so they can do better on the SAT. Or if you're ever considering about aiming for the National Merit Scholarship, then yeah, we actually want you to prepare at this very moment, right? So that you will know how to work on the test in a digital format. You get familiar with the testing style and strategy, so they can help you to score well. And just to let you know that this PSAT that offered in November, like if you're going to be a junior, this is going to be your last time taking the test. So we really want you to take that opportunity carefully. Okay. All right. So yeah, for the sophomore testing the guide there, if you're preparing for the test there, right, if you have already preparing it, we want you to finish that paper test by December. If not, then we should aim for the digital SAT. So you don't have to worry too much about preparing for this new test, but if you have time there, right, we definitely want you to start preparing while you still have a clear picture on what you've learned from school. Because for many of the sophomore there, they probably have like either in the progress of module 2 or just has completed it, right? Or maybe even the trigonometry. So you will still have fresh memory on what you learned on math and English. So this is actually a great chance for you to take the test and getting a perfect score. Okay. And of course, it says that there's some other advantage there, right? So they can get a jump start on the college admission process, right? With a finalized score. So you can spend time working on other things. And yes, later on, we can work on the digital SAT if needed. Okay. So the next question that many of our family may have, right? I literally have all the family asking me. They're saying that, oh, Alan, you explain all of this about like digital SATs or paper SATs, right? But I'm not even considering about taking the test, right? Why should I take SAT there? Because I heard that, oh, for UCs, they're doing test blind, right? I mean, they're no longer looking at the score at all. Then isn't coming here just a waste of time, right? Preparing for the test? That's actually a great question, right? But think about this. As for many of our students, like who's planning to apply for college, UCs won't be the only type of school they're applying for. There will be some other schools for them to aim for, right? Whether the private schools in California or out of state, not to mention about these top Ivy League schools. So when we're talking about those schools there, their test policies has been always either SAT optional or test required. So knowing that, having an SAT score there is actually going to provide you some admission advantage. Okay, so we actually have a chart there showing the admission submission impact, right, on the acceptance rate based on whether a student have a decent SAT score or not. So we can see that for most of the schools there, if you actually submit an application with SAT score, your chance of getting accepted would definitely be higher than other students. It doesn't say that, oh, you won't get into the school without a SAT score. No. But at this moment, since we all know how competitive it is, right, compared to, I mean, based on like after the COVID time, right, all the schools are getting like tons of applications too. So if you want to make yourself really competitive, you want to take every chances. So when the schools are actually saying test optional, as for all of you, right, who actually want to aim for top tier schools, it's actually a requirement. Okay, I mean, because like saying optional there doesn't mean that, oh, we can just leave it aside and not worry about this. I mean, imagine if a college is actually saying that, oh, we're gonna do a college essay in an option, or like we're gonna have actually have students do optional college essay. Then are you not gonna write a personal statement to share your leadership, right? Share your experience, or you rather want to write something just so that the admission officers will know you better. So that's also the case for SAT. Okay, you may feel like, oh, yeah, I mean, SATs there, why am I spending time preparing? Well, first of all, if you have been able to maintain a decent grade at school, then you are definitely able to to work on the SAT and getting a nearly perfect score within a much shorter period of time. And more importantly there, with the SAT score there, it will help you to apply for some other programs, whether we're talking about the summer programs, right, or an internship, when they actually asking you to demonstrate your achievement. This is one thing that you can share. Okay, and of course, by this very moment, most of the schools are actually saying like SAT option. But you can see that this is basically one thing that they're doing during the COVID time. And as time passed, many of the schools are actually going back to their SAT like score submission requirements. So for instance, for schools like Purdue or MIT, right? They are already saying that, oh, it's going to be SAT required again, right? Because, they want to make sure, out of all these students applying for, right? They want to make sure they're selecting those who has the best achievement, right? We're not just talking about like your GPA management, your academic success, but also for those who is able to demonstrate themselves under a standardized test. Okay. So yes, and for this slide, it's just to share that how the C2 can best support our students here. And actually, in fact, we have been very actively creating the new digital SAT curriculums. And back in our headquarters at Atlanta, we actually have a team of like content experts who has like decades of experience writing tests, preparing curriculums, and they have been working very hard over like the past years to generate some new practice tests and curriculums. So as for C2, we will have those curriculums ready, start preparing starting from next month. And our curriculums is actually designed to teach both the foundational skills that requires to be success, but also provide the students with the time management skill that requires to do well on the adaptive component. As you can see that one of the books that we have here will be the SAT strategy and assessment guide, because we noticed that for some of the students who's been performing well on practice tests might not getting the score they need on a real test due to unable to manage their time properly or making various kinds of so-called careless mistake. So we want to make sure that using guide like this to better prepare students to ensure that they're getting everything they need, right, for the actual test, so that they can just aim for that score, getting it within one or at most 2 attempts. And of course, besides that basic strategy, we also using, what we've been doing is that based on students' current level, we will have materials for different students. So we're having some easy ones, medium ones, or harder ones, so they can make sure that whether for a student who's aiming for like top tier schools, right, or just aiming for like let's say a 1400, right, so they can get into some of the still great private schools, right? We want to make sure that they'll be reaching their goals within the time that we planned, so that we can get rid of the SAT and then moving forward to the next stage as much as possible. And of course, on the slides here, you can see that see some of the detailed discussion on how those curriculums will best help our students. We'll have tons of practice problems, and then they will have like leveled curriculums so they can make sure to teach students on the area that they need help the most. Okay, and even if you're taking some paper tests, you will still be able to get most help out of it. Okay, and last slide there is just like talking about the C2 process. So basically, for those who's coming here, for instance, needing help with SAT, we're providing a diagnostic test, and then based on their test results, based on the breakdown, we will be able to establish a personalized program to support them, so that we're coming up with a unique plan, and then having our teachers to follow up during our exclusive one-on-one lecturing during the class. And of course, as for our tutors, they're all experts on the areas they're teaching. They have years of experience, so they know how to approach our students best. And while they're working the test, of course, we'll be able to assign them continuous practice tests as well as conference, so that we can make sure all the team members as well as the families will be on the same page on how the students doing at this moment. Okay, so if any of you are considering or just want to give it a shot, right, to see how the digital SAT works, let us know. Reach out to us. We'll be more than happy to schedule a diagnostic test with you. Okay, and I know this kind of already beyond 5:30, so yeah, I just want to check to see that if any of you will have any questions. So if you do, please feel free to send it on the chat box, or if you would like to talk to me in person, whether in English or in Mandarin, please feel free to reach out to the nearest C2 center, and then I'll be available to support you.